Hey guys, tonight we're following the clinking footsteps of a 19th century Ethiopian coffee merchant. You're in the highlands of Harar, where the dawn cuts through eucalyptus mist and the air smells like last night's embers. The world is just beginning to stretch its limbs. And you, lucky you, are already blinking at the soft light filtering into your woven hut. Outside, your mule snorts impatiently, and your boots are still wet from yesterday's stream crossing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing those sleepy little check-ins from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your mat is scratchy and smells faintly of last week's grain shipment. You groan softly and stretch, bones crackling like a thatched roof after a thunderstorm. Through the slit in your door, pale light glints off dewy grass, and the distant bleating of goats mixes with early bird calls, those birds that sound too chipper for someone who went to bed at midnight counting coins. Your hands automatically reach for the woven basket where you keep your prized beans. You take one out and roll it between your fingers. Dry, firm, just the right shade of mahogany. The roast is yesterday's, but the pride is fresh. That's your legacy in your palm. Harari coffee. As fragrant as it is finicky. Some say these beans are kissed by the wind from the Red Sea. Others, more grumpy, say you just burn them less than your cousin does. Outside, the mountains loom like old sleepy lions. Shadows stretching over the gorge. The air is cool enough that you can see your breath. And you wrap a faded cotton shawl over your shoulders. Your knees protest, as they always do, but the warmth of routine cushions the ache. You nudge open the creaking wooden door and squint. Sunrise here isn't soft. It spills gold over everything. No filter. The dirt path, the acacia trees, the rickety cartwheels left leaning against a wall, they all glow. And there, perched on a boulder as he always is, sits Jonas. Your mule's braying like it swallowed a hyena. He says, not looking at you. You grunt in response and go about lighting the small fire under the iron pan. It's not just for warmth. It's for that sacred ritual, the morning roast. You grind a few leftover beans in your carved mortar. Add a splash of water. And soon the aroma dances through the air like an old lullaby. Historians still argue whether the Harari roasting method was borrowed from Arab traders or if it predates them entirely. You, personally, think it's older than time. Or at least older than your mule. You sit back on your heels and sip slowly. The bitterness is perfect. A bit of ash, a whisper of cardamom. You dunk a stale piece of flatbread into the brew and chew with deliberate slowness. You have a long day ahead, and there's no use rushing a quiet morning. The hut next to yours stirs. A chicken hops out, followed by a child with one sock. The neighborhood is waking, and soon you hear the rhythmic thump of pestles and the low chants of a mother grinding sorghum. You let the steam warm your face and wonder if today you'll finally sell that sack to the grumpy buyer from Gondar. Or if he'll sniff, grimace, and say it's too acidic, as though his goats don't drink out of puddles. Jonas leans over and eyes your cup. You hand it to him without a word. Sharing coffee is half the culture and twice the politics. He slurps and nods once. High praise. It's easy to romanticize this life, the hills, the beans, the mystery of it all. But let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this. No mattress, no oat milk, no Starbucks reward points, just dust, sweat, and the faint chance a baboon might run off with your best pair of socks. But there's peace in it, too, a rhythm older than empire, steadier than any ruler. You stand slowly, stretch again, and take one last look at the sunrise painting the far hills ochre and peach. It's time. Your mule groans as you approach. Her name is Sanite, and she doesn't like mornings either. You pat her flank, check her hooves, and silently pray she won't kick you today. She does, of course, but gently. You load the burlap sacks with practiced grace, looping ropes through old leather buckles. Testing the weight, each sack holds about 20 kilograms of green coffee beans. Dried and sorted by hand, your hand. Mostly, with some help from cousins who mysteriously disappear every time work needs doing. You pause, look out at the ridgeline, and take one final breath of that crisp mountain air before the dust of the road swallows you. It's going to be a long, slow, Bumpy day, you start down the winding hill path that leads away from your village. Mule in tow and a stick in hand, not to hit, of course. Just for the occasional dramatic gesture. The path isn't paved, not even close. It's a collection of jagged rocks pretending to be a road, flanked by wild grasses, the odd flowering cactus, and the kind of thorny bushes that seem personally offended by the existence of ankles. The sky is already bright, the morning sun throwing spears of light through scattered clouds, and the shadows of you and Sunite stretch out like lazy ghosts behind you. The birds are louder now, and you hear the rustling of something, hopefully a squirrel. Not one of those monkeys with attitude problems, off in the trees. As you walk, the rhythm settles in, step, creak of the saddle, swish of the mule's tail. It's almost meditative, minus the fact that you're swatting at flies and trying not to trip on a rock and break your nose. Again, you pass by a trio of children herding goats. One is barefoot, the other's wearing shoes made from old tires. They wave, and you wave back. They're heading up to the higher fields where the grass is thick and the goats can pretend they're royalty. You think for a moment about childhood. Yours wasn't so different. Days spent fetching water, avoiding chores, and perfecting the art of skipping stones. Only difference is, now you skip coffee prices instead. The first market town is still hours away, and the trail between here and there winds through lowland valleys and across a river that's moody at best. You reach the first checkpoint, a clearing where old men gather on worn mats and share local gossip disguised as news. You nod respectfully. One of them raises an eyebrow and says, "Still pushing beans, as if it's a new insult. You shrug and say, "Still chewing cot, He laughs. You win. You pause to check the sacks. Still secure. Sunite's doing well today, no limping, no suspicious grunts. You offer her a bit of dried sorghum and rub behind her ears. She snorts, which is mule for tolerable. This section of the trail is known for its unpredictable weather. The sky's clear now, but you've lived through enough sudden downpours to know better than to trust it. You look up, blue, with a few cotton puff clouds. That's usually the kind of sky that tricks you into leaving your cloak behind. You didn't fall for it this time. Historians still argue whether the trade routes through this region were first charted by Aksumite envoys or by earlier nomadic tribes who simply followed the scent of fresh water and opportunity. Either way, you're walking in the footsteps of 1,000 generations, merchants, smugglers, monks, and the occasional lost camel. You pass by a stone marker carved with ancient symbols. Most people walk past it without a glance, but you always pause. It's rumored to be a boundary stone from a long-gone sultanate, though no one agrees which one. Some say it marks a line of protection. Others whisper that it keeps something in. You like to think it's just a very dramatic rock. The trail dips steeply now, winding down into the valley. You can smell the river before you see it, moist, earthy, with the faint smell of fish and wet reeds. A frog croaks somewhere to your left, and your foot squelches into a patch of unexpected mud. Lovely. You reach the riverbank and pause. The crossing here is always a gamble. There's no bridge, just a series of rocks that range from safe stepping stones to slippery doom buttons. You test a few with your stick. Firm enough. Sunite gives you a look that says, "If I fall, you're explaining this to the ancestors." One careful step at a time. You guide her across. The water's only knee-deep today, blessing of blessings, but it's cold enough to make you wince and mutter something unprintable. Midway through, your left sandal gets a little too cozy with a stone and you nearly go full slapstick. You recover with a dramatic flail and a quiet prayer to Saint Caldi, patron saint of not falling in rivers. You make it across. Barely. You wring out your shawl and check the bags again. No leaks. Just one very unimpressed mule. The climb on the other side is rougher. This side of the valley is less traveled, and the thorn bushes seem determined to reclaim the path. You push through, snag your sleeve on something, and end up with a twig in your beard. Par for the course. Eventually, you reach the rise and spot a patch of shade under a fig tree. Time for a break. You drop your pack, offer Sunite some water, and sit with your back against the cool bark. From here, you can see the winding trail behind you, like a lazy snake coiled between hills. You pull out a small pouch of roasted beans, your secret stash. Chewing them keeps your mind sharp. Your breath, not so much. But it's tradition. And besides, It tastes like pride. You watch a hawk circle overhead and feel that old sense of quiet satisfaction settle in. This isn't just work. This is your heritage, your routine, your place in the rhythm of things. The journey's long, but it's familiar. Still, part of you hopes the buyer doesn't haggle today. Or at least haggles politely by mid-morning. The sun is starting to get that smug look it wears when it knows you're going to sweat. You rise from beneath the fig tree, stretch your back with a creak, and give Senite a pat of encouragement. Time to push on. The next stretch leads through scrubland, the kind of terrain that's dry, spiny, and somehow still buzzing with life. The air smells like dust and resin. Every step kicks up the scent of sun-baked soil and thorn bushes. A few low-flying bees hover lazily near wildflowers that look like they've given up on color. But the peace here is real. No traders shouting, no carts squeaking, just the rhythmic shuffle of hooves and the distant trill of birds trying to impress each other. You crest a low ridge and catch your first glimpse of the outer edge of the coffee market. Just a blur of huts, awnings, and smoke in the distance. Still several miles to go. But it's a good sign. You've made decent time, which is remarkable considering your mule once took a full day to cross a puddle because it looked at her funny. The path widens here, and you begin to pass others, some on foot, some on donkeys, a few riding mules that look suspiciously smug. A man in a red shawl calls out a greeting and asks if you've heard the latest rumor. You haven't, but you'll pretend you have just to avoid a 30-minute detour into the details of his cousin's neighbor's goat. You exchange a few pleasantries and keep walking. He mentions bandits. You nod, but don't worry, everyone talks about bandits. No one's actually seen one since the Sultan cracked down 2 years ago. Still, you keep your stick close, just in case. A bit further on, you spot something odd on the side of the road. A set of smooth stones arranged in a deliberate spiral. Maybe a child playing, maybe something older. Some say travelers leave patterns as signs to those in the know. Others claim the spirals are protective charms. Historians still argue whether such markings are coded wayfinding devices or just evidence of human boredom during long walks. You stop to adjust the sacks on Senite's back. One has started leaning dangerously left, threatening a dramatic tumble and a very awkward repacking session. You redistribute the weight carefully, listening to the beans shift with that dry rustling sound that always makes you think of rain on canvas. Your stomach growls. Time for a snack. You reach into your pouch and pull out a bit of injera folded around some lentils, last night's dinner repurposed for today's sustenance. You eat as you walk, tearing off bits with one hand and offering scraps to the occasional passing dog who looks like it survived 3 regimes and still judges your fashion sense. As the terrain begins to soften, you enter a zone of eucalyptus groves. The scent hits immediately, cool, sharp, and oddly comforting. It clears the dust from your nose and gives the illusion of fresh energy. Even if your legs strongly disagree, eucalyptus isn't native to Ethiopia, but it's been here long enough to feel like it belongs. Introduced by Emperor Menelik II in the late 1800s to deal with deforestation near Addis Ababa. It's now everywhere, towering over the land like whispering sentinels. You pause for water beside a well where a group of women are filling clay jugs. They eye you with polite curiosity, and one of them offers you a drink before you can even ask. You thank her with a nod. The water is cool, slightly mineral, with a taste that reminds you of wet stone and something faintly metallic. Not perfect, but it'll do. Senite drinks greedily, then starts nudging you with her head like she's ready to move. Patience is not her strongest virtue. Neither is subtlety. Back on the path, you begin rehearsing your pitch. Every merchant has their angle, their little monologue crafted to sway buyers just enough. Yours includes phrases like, sun-dried at elevation, distinct floral notes, and beans from a region once favored by royal caravans. Whether or not the latter is true doesn't matter, it's poetic. And buyers love poetry almost as much as they love a good discount. You spot a falcon perched on a dead branch, watching you with the cold indifference only birds of prey can muster. You bow your head slightly out of respect. Not because you're superstitious, well, maybe just a little. The conversation in your head continues. You debate the starting price. Too high. And the buyer scoffs. Too low. And you've insulted your own work. You remind yourself. The beans are good. Some of the best from your village this season. Dense. Aromatic. Uniform in size, your uncle would be proud. Or at least less grumpy. Then comes a jolt of excitement, the scent of roasting beans. Not yours. These are from someone already brewing in the outskirts of the market. That smoky, bitter perfume makes your pulse quicken. You're close. The trade square is only a mile or two away now. You adjust your shawl, swipe a hand across your brow, and spit out the eucalyptus leaf you'd been chewing for no reason other than habit. Sanite snorts. You nod. Showtime is near. One last hill. One final push before the marketplace comes into full view. You take a deep breath, already tasting the dust, noise, and negotiation that awaits. And maybe, just maybe, a cup of the good stuff, fresh brewed, bitter as regret, hot enough to burn memory into your tongue. But first, you've got to get through the price dance. And no one's had their coffee yet. The slope into town is gentle. But your legs protest anyway. They've been walking since sunrise. And frankly, they've had enough. Still, the marketplace is in sight now, smoke curling into the sky. Shouts of haggling bouncing off mud brick walls. The distant clatter of clay cups and bronze bells. You follow the well-worn path as it funnels into the trading center. Past scattered tents and pop-up food stalls. You've arrived in Bonga, heart of Kaffa, one of the oldest coffee-producing regions in the world. This isn't just any town. This is coffee royalty. The name, Kaffa, is likely where the word, coffee, comes from. Though historians still argue whether it was more linguistically influenced by Arabic, Kahwa, or local dialects that predated even that. You pull Sanite aside under a shady awning. She lets out a long breath that sounds suspiciously like judgment, and then proceeds to ignore you completely. Time to unpack, carefully. Each sack is unbundled with care. The beans inside already warming in the mid-morning heat. You do a quick count. Still full. Still fragrant. Nothing spilled. You breathe a small sigh of relief and tighten the ropes one more time for good measure. Now, to get a spot. The trade area is a semi-organized chaos. Merchants from every corner of the region have laid out their goods. Sacks of teff. Bundles of frankincense. Baskets of kola nuts. Strings of dried chilies. Everyone shouting in 3 languages at once. Arms waving. Faces earnest. There's a rhythm to it. A kind of dusty ballet. Where transactions happen mid-sentence and no one ever seems to remember where they were standing 5 minutes ago. You squeeze into a corner spot next to an elderly woman selling woven baskets. She gives you a once-over and, after some negotiation involving half a dried fish and a compliment on her teeth, agrees to let you set up. You spread your cloth, arrange your beans in tidy piles, and unroll the tiny sign you made using charcoal and stubbornness. Highland beans, smooth finish, honest trade. It's not exactly marketing gold, but it'll do. Your first customer arrives before you've even opened your water pouch. A young trader with impeccably clean sandals and the energy of someone who has not walked since sunrise. He lifts a handful of beans, sniffs them, then chews one thoughtfully, because yes, that's a thing people do. You smile politely and brace for the opening volley. Too green, he says, trying to sound authoritative. You raise an eyebrow. Sun-dried, not washed. That's the color from altitude. He pauses. He's clearly not sure what that means. But he nods slowly as if you've quoted an ancient proverb. The dance begins. He offers half what they're worth. You laugh. He scoffs. You shake your head with theatrical sorrow. Mention how far you walked. He offers a little more. You throw in a story about how your uncle once sold beans to a diplomat's cousin's servant. He likes that. You drop your price slightly. He leans in. You pretend to be insulted. Finally, you settle on something just high enough to keep your pride and just low enough that he'll come back next week. The deal is sealed with a handshake and a mutual eye roll. The universal language of the marketplace. You wrap up the beans in a fresh cloth, hand them over, and watch your first sale walk away. Not bad, not great, but not bad. The woman beside you offers you a roasted chickpea from her snack pouch. You accept it gratefully and crunch it with the kind of over-exaggerated chewing that makes her snort with laughter. You've made a temporary friend. And in a market like this, that's more valuable than silver. A traveling storyteller sets up nearby. He begins with a tale about a goat who invents a coffee brew so strong it makes the priest dance. You're pretty sure he made that up. But it's wildly entertaining, and weirdly close to the old legend that Kaldi A goat herder discovered coffee after his animals got unusually perky from munching on red berries. Historians still argue whether Kaldi even existed. The man chuckles between lines, clearly enjoying the performance. But hey, let's not ruin a good story with facts. He's got a point. The sun climbs higher. The marketplace gets louder. A man walks past selling tiny clay cups of spiced coffee. You hand him a coin before he even asks. The first sip hits you like a memory, bold, earthy, slightly sweet, with that unmistakable edge of roasted magic. It's the kind of coffee that makes your eyes close without meaning to. The kind that makes you momentarily forget how much your feet hurt. You offer Sanite a few roasted beans as a treat. She sniffs them, sneezes dramatically, then turns away. You shrug. Her loss. Business continues at a gentle pace. Some haggle, some don't. A wealthy merchant in fine white linen tries to pay with promises instead of silver. You smile and suggest he try that line with the tax collector. He laughs, but pays properly. A group of children dart through the crowd playing tag, trailing dust and laughter. One almost collides with your display. You freeze, but they swerve at the last second. And your precious beans remain intact. Barely. By midday, the heat is humming. You drape your shawl loosely over your head, squinting against the glare. The market begins to settle into its afternoon lull. That odd pause when even the loudest sellers stop shouting and everyone suddenly remembers their humanity. You lean back against a basket, sip the last of your coffee, and let the sounds swirl around you. Bells, birds, bartering, breeze. This is what you came for. Not just the sales, the whole dance, the swirl of dust and culture, history and heat. You've made a few sales, traded stories, dodged bandits, mostly theoretical ones, survived another morning as a coffee merchant in 19th century Ethiopia. And the day is only half done. The early afternoon sun hangs heavy over Bonga, turning shadows into narrow lines and painting the town in bleached gold. The market is still bustling, but the rhythm has changed. It's slower now, like a lullaby played on a stringed crowar, everyone still dancing. But with half-lidded eyes and dragging feet. You tilt your head back, letting the warm breeze tickle your face. Your shawl slips a little, but you leave it. You've earned this sun. You've also earned a few coins jingling softly in your pouch. The proof that someone, somewhere, appreciates your Highland beans. But don't get too cozy, there's still networking to do. A man you've seen before approaches. He's got a salt and pepper beard and a walking stick that looks like it's been passed down through 6 generations of clever traders. You nod politely. He nods back. Then he launches into a critique of your display. You shouldn't bunch the beans too close. They need to breathe. You squint at him. Do you want to buy some or critique my interior design? He chuckles. Both. This, you know, is Basha. He's not just a merchant. He's a node in the invisible web of gossip, price checking, and weather predictions that runs this town. Basha knows everyone, and more importantly, everyone owes Basha something. So when he says he might be able to introduce your product to some caravan heading north, your ears perk up like Sanite hearing a mango drop. He tests a handful of beans between his palms, rubbing them together like he's checking flour. Then he pops one into his mouth, chews slowly, and frowns thoughtfully. That's it. Just, You wait. After a pause long enough to boil an egg, he says, it's not bad. A little floral, not too acidic. Feels confident. You blink. Confident? He nods. Your beans walk into the room with a straight back. That kind of confident. You're not entirely sure what that means. But you smile like it was your goal all along. He buys 2 sacks, pays in silver, and tells you to look out for a man named Gedahin who wears a red sash and smells like lemons. Apparently, Gedahin controls one of the caravans that winds its way through Sudan into Egypt. Coffee by Camelback. Now that's a sales pitch. After Basha leaves, you reorganize your goods with a bit more flair. A few extra folds in the cloth. A tighter bean pyramid. You even place a single bright red berry on top of the pile, because if anyone asks, it's symbolic. Sanite yawns noisily behind you. You're pretty sure it's not about the berry. Just then, a stranger catches your eye. She's short, wears her hair in elaborate coils, and has a belt full of metal tools that clink softly as she walks. A healer, perhaps? Or an herb seller? Nope. She approaches your stall with intense focus and asks a question that surprises you. Do your beans help with dreams? You pause. Excuse me? She explains, in the slow, deliberate tone of someone who talks more to plants than people, that certain coffee beans, when brewed with wild basil and dried fig, can enhance dreams. She believes your highland beans might be particularly useful, due to something altitude, something energy lines. You don't interrupt. You're too busy silently wondering whether to double your price for spiritual coffee. Historians still argue whether traditional Ethiopian herbalism formally recognized coffee as a dream aid. She adds casually, as if quoting a university lecture. But oral traditions suggest experimentation with combinations as early as the 1700s. You hand her a small bundle of beans and tell her they're very good for evening visions. She pays with a small silver ring and a promise to return. There are worse customers. As the sun dips lower, a new flavor of sound filters in. Song. A group of boys sing a call and response chant as they haul water jugs from the nearby river. Their voices rise over the dust and gossip like birds. Each word rhythmic. Practiced. You recognize some of the lyrics. It's part prayer, part joke. One line warns that the lazy camel will never reach the mountains. Another suggests that coffee is a gift from the gods and an acceptable excuse to avoid chores. You find yourself humming along. Later, the tax collector arrives. Always a fun time. He's wearing a faded uniform, with buttons that gleam far more brightly than his mood. He doesn't say much, just looks around, notes a few names on his parchment, and then peers at your stall. How much did you sell today? You smile politely. Enough to pay taxes, not enough to brag. He actually cracks a smile. A rare one. He jots something down and moves on. You breathe a little easier. You had enough coins set aside. But it's nice not to need them. You stretch your legs, briefly closing your eyes. In the quiet that follows, you imagine the next leg of your journey, the trading post near Lake Tana. The winding mountain passes, the village where that one guy insisted his goats could predict rainfall. You'll get there, eventually. But for now, you sit in the golden light of afternoon, with roasted beans at your feet and faint coffee on your breath. The market is alive, but winding down. Dust swirls gently. A lullaby of small sounds fills the air. You sip another clay cup, this one infused with cinnamon. It tastes like stories. And just for a moment, everything feels still by late afternoon. The market has begun its slow exhale. The rush of morning trade has softened into casual bargaining, idle chatter, and the occasional nap taken a little too seriously under a makeshift awning. Your beans are mostly sold. Your coin pouch is satisfyingly weighty. And your legs have that pleasant ache that says, yes, you earned your bread today. Now comes the truly delicate task, making social rounds. Not just for gossip, mind you, in a town like Bonga. Known who drank which spiced tea and when they last argued about donkey tariffs is the difference between making a sale and being passed over for the next eager merchant with a better smile and a newer head wrap. You stroll slowly down the alley of sellers, nodding to a weaver whose patterns you admire, complimenting an elderly woman on her banana leaf baskets, even though one of them is definitely crooked, and accepting a piece of fried dough from a teenage boy who insists it's on the house. It's rock hard and vaguely shaped like a bird. You eat it anyway. That's politics. You finally make your way to the shade of a large fig tree where a small group is already lounging, sipping tall cups of honey wine and sharing local news. One man is telling a story, something about a goat that supposedly bit a priest during a wedding ceremony. The punchline involves a lot of bleeding and a ruined pair of ceremonial sandals. You wait for laughter, then casually insert yourself into the circle. So, did the goat survive? Laughter again. Just like that, you're in. These late-day gatherings are where deals are born, friendships are tested, and the local reputation economy gets recalibrated like a caravan compass. One elder nods to you and asks how your beans fared today. You give a modest shrug. The universally understood signal for, I did fine, but I want you to think I'm just lucky. Not actually talented. Someone mentions a new tax coming in from the north. Another claims there's been talk of foreigners wanting more ivory and less coffee. A quiet debate stirs, whispers of Italian ships spotted off the Red Sea coast. Someone claims they've brought their own beans. Tiny and bitter. Beans that taste like a boiled argument. One man jokes, You tuck that phrase away. Might use it in a sales pitch. Then someone mentions a wedding. A big one. Important family. Tomorrow. You perk up. Will there be a coffee ceremony? Of course there will be. Every wedding worth remembering has one. But this one, apparently, will feature layered roasting, starting with lightly toasted beans, ending in the full dark roast finale with incense and dance. You casually suggest that your beans are ideal for such nuance. Someone grunts. Another smiles. You may have just secured your next sale. Historians still argue whether Ethiopia's famed coffee ceremony, bunna, developed all at once or evolved slowly over centuries. What's clear is that by your century, it's more than just a drink. It's a full-body, 3-hour, sensory experience, with poetry, firewood, gossip, and the occasional proposal of marriage. You don't just pour coffee, you summon it. You leave the group feeling lighter, though it could be the honey wine kicking in. By now, the golden hour has settled in like a lazy cat. The town is draped in amber light, and the air smells like warm clay and fading charcoal. You make your way back toward your stall, passing a small courtyard where 3 children are chasing a chicken in circles. One of them wears a goat bell around her neck and shouts, "I'm the caravan leader now." You salute her as you pass. She salutes back with exaggerated ceremony. Back at your stall, Sanite has already packed most of the leftover beans. You'll carry them home on your back, of course, in the same woven basket your mother used when she traded goat's milk for eucalyptus soap. As you hoist the sack onto your shoulders, you hear the distinctive clink of iron hooves behind you. A lone trader passes with a mule, its coat dusty and its eyes resigned. You nod to the man. He nods back. There's something timeless in that moment. 2 traders acknowledging the weary, wonderful absurdity of your profession. No need for words. As you start the walk back through the quieter paths of Bonga, your mind drifts to that healer with the dream theory. You wonder if she's brewing your beans right now, waiting for some grand vision to reveal itself. Maybe she'll dream of you. Maybe you'll be selling beans to the emperor in her sleep. Maybe you'll be flying over the Rift Valley on a giant coffee leaf. Or maybe she'll just sleep better. Either way, not a bad result. You pass a man carrying clay jars of tej on a long wooden yoke. He hums a tune, soft and ancient. You hum along before realizing it's the same lullaby your grandmother used to sing when the rains wouldn't come. The road turns uphill, and your legs protest. Just a little. You smile to yourself. The last few sunbeams stretch like lazy cats across the rooftops. And Bonga glows, quiet, proud, a little sleepy. You pat your pouch again. Not just coins, connections, promises, stories, and the faint, lingering scent of roasted highland beans. You don't hurry. Night doesn't chase you in this town. It welcomes you. The sky shifts from golden to violet as you round the final bend toward home. Bonga isn't a city that stays up late by nightfall. It exhales and settles into a quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat slowing after a long climb. You hear it in the rustling of eucalyptus leaves, in the murmured prayers drifting from open windows, and in the thud-thud of your own feet against the red dirt path. Your home isn't grand, but it is dignified, a circular tukul with a thatched roof, walls smoothed with mud and dung, and decorated with faded but lovingly arranged amulets and beadwork. The doorway tilts slightly to the left, it always has, and it probably always will. It's not broken, it's just yours. Sanite has beaten you back by 20 minutes, which means she's had just enough time to sweep the floor and prepare the evening incense. The smoky sweet scent of frankincense greets you like an old dog. You inhale deeply, letting it unspool the last threads of the day's tension from your shoulders. You set the basket down in the corner with a satisfied grunt. Tomorrow, you'll sort the leftover beans by size and sheen, and set aside a handful to roast for the healer, in case her dreams were extra vivid. But tonight is for rest, and possibly for lentils. Sanite is humming in the kitchen alcove, stirring a pot that smells strongly of berbere and garlic. You didn't haggle with that butcher again, did you? She asks without turning around. You raise your hands in surrender. He offered me 2 cuts for the price of 3. I couldn't say no. She laughs in that quiet way that means she doesn't believe you, but doesn't mind. While she cooks, you begin preparing the evening bunna. Even after selling beans all day, there's something sacred about this part, brewing your own. You select the shiny, Uncracked beans from a small calabash bowl and pour them into your family's mukecha, the mortar used for crushing. The wooden pestle is smooth from years of use, and it takes less than 5 minutes to reduce the beans to a fine, fragrant pile. The jabena, your round-bellied clay coffee pot, has already been rinsed and set by the fire. You fill it with fresh water and add the crushed grounds, humming the same lullaby you heard on the road. The rhythm of coffee is the rhythm of home: grind, boil, pour, sip, exhale. Historians still argue whether the coffee preparation ritual in 19th century Ethiopia was entirely domestic or shared communally in rotation among neighbors. What's clear is that in most families, including yours, the evening brew is both a pause and a punctuation mark. Sanait brings the lentils to the mat and sits cross-legged across from you. You pass her the first cup, always her first, because she handles her caffeine like a warrior. You wait for her sip before taking your own. It's strong, a little smoky, with that nutty aftertaste that only comes from beans roasted over eucalyptus charcoal. As you eat, the conversation meanders. She tells you that the potter down the lane had a baby goat wander into her house and break 3 bowls. The goat, unrepentant, is now being treated as a reincarnated ancestor. You both agree this is possibly a clever cover story to avoid refunding the buyer. You tell her about the wedding tomorrow, and she raises an eyebrow. Layered roasting? That's a gamble. You sure your beans can handle it? You lean back smugly. My beans could make the dead sit up and ask for cream. She chuckles. No cream. You know how I feel about that foreign stuff. The fire crackles, and outside, the sounds of night deepen. Crickets chirp in steady rhythms. A hyena howls in the far-off hills, not menacing, just stating its presence. Somewhere, a drum beats softly, likely part of a ritual or maybe a drunken uncle celebrating a chicken's engagement. Hard to say. You take another sip of coffee. Slower this time. The second round always tastes more complex. A hint of citrus. Maybe. Or maybe that's just your tongue playing tricks. Sanait asks if you're going to the morning market tomorrow. And you shake your head. Taking the day. Prepping for the wedding. I might even polish my sandals. She whistles in mock surprise. What's the occasion? Planning to impress someone? You waggle your eyebrows. Only the bride's aunt. She has a donkey cart and no husband. You both laugh again. The kind of laughter that settles deep into your bones and reminds you that exhaustion is temporary. But this strange, quiet, roasted bean life, is permanent in the best possible way. After dinner, you step outside. The stars have fully emerged, shimmering in clusters like gossiping grandmothers. No moon tonight, but the sky doesn't feel empty, it feels expectant. You can almost hear it listening. A neighbor's child walks past with a reed torch, followed by a goat wearing a woven hat. Neither of them acknowledges the oddity. You stretch. Your spine cracks in 2 places. A reminder that no matter how flexible you feel during the day, night always tells the truth. Back inside, Sanait has laid out the mat and unrolled the sleeping cloth. You blow out the oil lamp, leaving only the fading embers of the cooking fire to paint the walls in flickering orange. Tomorrow brings wedding roasts and distant relatives and the potential for political alliance via well-timed laughter. But tonight brings this: heat, silence, and the final sips of a good cup. You lie down, exhaling slowly, and let your hand brush the woven edge of your coffee basket. The beans inside are asleep. So, in a moment, will you be awake just before dawn, not because you want to, but because Bonga says it's time. There's a peculiar sound that only happens in this hour, somewhere between night's last breath and morning's first whisper. You know it well. The hoot of a sleepy owl begrudgingly giving up its shift. The rustle of banana leaves as they sigh against each other. And the low, contented snuffle of a neighbor's cow having dreams, presumably, about hay. You stretch beneath the soft cloth, joints cracking like the starter pistol of a reluctant marathon. Sanait still sleeps, curled like a question mark, her braids slightly undone. You resist the urge to smooth it, better not to wake her. She's got a long day ahead with the wedding preparations, and the beans won't roast themselves. Outside, the air is crisp and damp, smelling faintly of wood smoke, turned soil, and something herbal. Maybe lemongrass from the neighbor's garden or just the ghost of yesterday's incense. You throw a shawl over your shoulder, grab your woven coffee pouch, and step out barefoot onto the dewy ground. Today is not about selling. It's about brewing. Your role isn't merchant now, it's more like humble magician. The beans must be roasted to perfection for the bride's family, layered, balanced, gently aromatic, and more importantly, the first pour must be smooth enough to make old uncles quiet down and listen. The roasting space is modest, a sheltered area beside your tukul. Protected from wind but open enough to let the smoke rise freely. You set out the menkeshkesh, your wide, flat roasting pan, and place it over the fire pit. The coals are already glowing faintly. You thank last night's embers for sticking around. Your beans are laid out on a mat, sorted and sun-dried the week before. You pick up a handful and run them through your fingers. They feel warm, even now, either a trick of your hand or a good omen. You begin the slow, hypnotic process of roasting, turning, shaking, stirring, no rush. You don't want to shock the beans. Historians still debate whether 19th century Ethiopian coffee roasting methods were purely sensory, passed down orally, or if there existed coded rituals kept secret within certain families. What's undeniable is that each roaster had their own rhythm, and yours has been compared favorably to a rooster learning to dance, which is to say, quirky, but surprisingly effective. The beans darken, first tan, then brown, then almost black, but never oily. That's for those strange Europeans who think bitterness equals refinement. You roast for aroma, not punishment. A sweet, smoky scent begins to rise, and you feel it in your chest before your nose. It's the kind of smell that makes babies stop crying and elders tell jokes they haven't used since the Zamin Masafant. Once the beans are ready, you spread them out on a clay plate to cool. The crackling stops, replaced by a faint ticking. Like tiny applause. You allow yourself a grin. You've done well. Sanite steps out, blinking into the morning. She yawns wide enough to startle a passing chicken. You're already roasting? She says. Voice gravelly with sleep. You nod. Wedding waits for no bean. She snorts and ducks back inside. She'll emerge again with a comb, a shawl, and at least one sarcastic comment about your ceremonial sandals. While the beans cool, you begin preparing the other ingredients. You gather the cinnamon sticks, fresh cardamom pods, and a bit of crushed ginger, optional, but appreciated, especially by the mother of the groom, who once claimed your spiced bunna helped cure her son's foot rash. You don't question the logic. You just nod wisely and take the compliment. With everything ready, you pack the equipment carefully into a large woven basket. The wedding will take place at the bride's uncle's farmstead, just on the edge of town. Past the grazing hills and a tree shaped exactly like a sleeping cow if you squint right. The walk will take an hour, maybe more, depending on distractions, goat blockades, curious children, or spontaneous philosophical debates with traveling monks. You set out with Sanite beside you. She's carrying the tall clay jabena, swaddled in fabric like a sacred relic, which, in many ways, it is. The road is dappled with early sunlight, and the village is beginning to wake. Chickens strut, dogs stretch, and someone is already arguing with a rooster about punctuality. As you walk, you pass familiar faces. The weaver who always claims your beans make him see colors. The old soldier who insists he once shared coffee with Emperor Tedros, though his math never quite adds up. And the young girl who once mistook the roasting pan for a musical instrument and tried to join your ceremony by drumming on it. Each nod and greeting is a quiet reminder of your role, not just as a merchant, but as a kind of caffeine bard. You don't just sell coffee. You bring it to life. The path winds gently upward, and by the time the wedding site comes into view, the sun is high enough to gild the tops of the enset trees. The farmstead bustles with activity. A tent of colorful cloth flutters in the breeze. Goats have been herded into a suspiciously clean pen, and someone is singing a song about a potato who fell in love with a yam. You set your basket down by the cooking area, just far enough from the roasting fires that your precious beans won't absorb rogue meat smoke. A woman in a red shawl gestures you toward a central mat, already surrounded by elders holding empty cups and skeptical expressions. It's time. You roll up your sleeves. Sanite gives you a look that says, "Don't mess this up." You return a look that says, "I never do." Both looks are probably overconfident. As you light the fire under your jabena, you begin the ritual anew. Crush, brew, pour, breathe. The conversation fades to a hush. Even the goats seem to understand the gravity of the moment. The first cup goes to the bride's grandmother. She sips. She smacks her lips. She stares at you for one breathless second, then nods. Approval. And just like that, the wedding begins. The wedding dances will come later. And so will the feasting, the speeches, and the inevitable storytelling competition between two uncles who still believe they personally witnessed Haile Selassie's birth. But right now, you are still the quiet center of the storm, seated cross-legged on a woven mat, brewing the second round of coffee for the family of the bride. This second round, called Tona, is gentler than the first. The grounds have already given their initial strength, and now offer a more mellow, reflective brew. You pour with care, tilting the jabena just so, ensuring the stream is unbroken, like a ribbon of dark silk sliding into the waiting cups. There's a peculiar satisfaction in this moment. Around you, the world is in soft motion, women carrying platters of food, children chasing a stubborn chicken that clearly isn't on today's menu, and elders murmuring about the weather, the harvest, and the price of salt in the lowlands. You are inside the scene, and yet removed from it, like a flute player whose song only the sky seems to hear. Sanait returns with a small bundle wrapped in banana leaves. She kneels beside you and peels it open, revealing roasted barley and honeyed nuts. Wedding snacks. She steals one before handing you the rest. You're a hit, she whispers. You nod modestly, as if to say, of course, but inwardly you're relieved. A poorly brewed second round can ruin even the best first impression. The Tona is meant to invite conversation, to loosen thoughts the way rainfall softens dry soil. One of the elders leans in toward you, cup in hand. You ever been to Harar? He asks. You shake your head. He chuckles. Then you've never had real coffee. The old challenge. You meet it with a grin and a slow sip of your own brew. Then Harar's never had mine. He laughs, loudly enough to startle a goat, and claps you on the back. The ice is broken. Soon others are chiming in. Anecdotes about distant markets, tall tales involving cursed beans, and fond memories of grandmothers who could brew coffee strong enough to make a lion blink. Somewhere between the second and third cup, you fall into conversation with a young man who's studying to become a scribe. He's curious about your trade routes. Do you really walk all the way to Jimma? He asks. Wide-eyed, you nod, and back again, unless I decide to stay and grow old with the trees. He smiles, then leans in. Historians still argue whether the best beans come from Kaffa or Sidamo. What do you think? You pause. It's a question of heresy. Each region claims superiority, but you give the only answer a seasoned merchant can. Depends on the roast, the water, and the company. He nods solemnly, as if you've just recited ancient wisdom, which, to be fair, you sort of have. The third round of coffee, baraka, is meant to bless. It's more symbolic than stimulating. And by now, the air is thick with scent, roasted bean, spiced incense, and fried butter from the wedding kitchen. You pour slower this time, letting the weight of the day settle in your shoulders, and not minding it one bit. Children gather around, not for coffee, but for stories. They've seen you before, at markets, at festivals, and they know you have tales. You oblige them with one about a leopard who tried to brew coffee and fell asleep in his own fire pit. It's silly and makes no sense, but the giggles are worth it. Even Sanait cracks a smile. Nearby, the bride appears, radiant in her white cotton dress, hair adorned with butter and beads, her smile bright enough to rival the midday sun. She kneels before her grandmother, offering the final cup of baraka. It is accepted with grace. You feel your part in this day is done, not because anyone says so, but because the rhythm of the event tells you so. Like the end of a good song, you don't need an announcement, you just feel it in your bones. You begin to gather your things. The jabena, still warm, is wrapped gently. The leftover grounds are spread at the base of a fig tree, an old habit for luck. You thank the hosts, nod to the elders, accept a leftover bread roll from a child with sticky fingers, and start the long walk home. Sanait walks beside you again. She hums under her breath. Maybe a wedding song, maybe something older. The sun is lower now, casting golden shadows across the path. You've earned a rest, but there's always something next, beans to grind, new orders to prepare, and word that another market might be setting up 3 days to the west. Do you ever get tired of it? Sanait asks after a while. You think, not for long, sometimes, but only in the legs. Never in the heart. She rolls her eyes but doesn't argue. At home, your neighbors greet you with the usual theatrics. Back from feeding half the village? One teases. Did they let you keep your shoes this time? Another asks. You answer with exaggerated bows and dramatic tales of elderly women who could outdrink warriors. Of beans so fragrant they made a priest confess twice. Of a boy who mistook coffee grounds for cow medicine and got both wide-eyed and slightly prophetic. As the sun slips behind the hills, you prepare a small fire. Not for business, not for ceremony, just for yourself. One last cup, just how you like it, quiet, smoky, unhurried. You sit under the open sky. Stars blinking to life one by one. The village settles down around you. Somewhere, a dog barks without commitment. Somewhere else, a baby discovers the injustice of bedtime. And you're just a coffee merchant with tired feet and a warm cup. Watching the steam rise like a gentle promise the next morning starts with the rooster who takes his job far too seriously. His crow is long, dramatic, and somehow smug, as if he personally created the sun and is just reminding you to thank him for it. You open your eyes slowly. The mat beneath you is still warm from last night's fire. Outside, the world hasn't quite awakened yet. There's the whisper of wind against eucalyptus leaves, a low murmur of cattle stirring in the distance, and the faint, promising scent of baking bread wafting in from your neighbor's hut. Stretch, crack your neck, crack your back, regret the cracked back. A new day. And that means one thing. Back to business. You begin your morning routine with practiced calm. Water is fetched from the stream, cold enough to make your teeth flinch. You splash your face, arms, and feet, then offer a brief thanks to the river spirits, just in case they're listening today. Your trade involves enough unpredictable luck that a little superstition never hurts. Breakfast is humble. Some leftover barley cakes and a handful of roasted chickpeas. You chew slowly, already running your mental inventory. How many sacks of beans left? Is the good jabena still cracked? Did that one elder from the wedding actually mean it when he said he wanted to buy half a kilo? Your pack is lighter than usual today. No need for long travel just yet. Instead, you're heading into the nearby village for the weekly market, a smaller affair than the grand city bazaars. But often more lucrative. Here, people know you, trust you, and more importantly, they've been waiting all week for a good cup of bunna. As you trudge down the narrow dirt path, sandals slapping rhythmically, you pass a group of children chasing a goat that clearly doesn't want to be chased. One stops to wave at you. Merchant, my mother says your beans smell better than our soap. You grin, tell her to try washing with them. Might start a trend. The boy laughs and runs off, nearly tripping over the goat, who seems to be winning whatever game this is. Reaching the market square, the scene is already in motion, a patchwork of woven mats, colorful cloth, and bustling voices. Farmers display onions in neat piles. A woman sells hand-ground spices from little clay jars, each mound forming a fragrant mountain. Potters shout over each other, arguing whose clay sings sweeter when tapped. You find your usual spot, shaded by a crooked fig tree that sheds leaves with the lazy grace of a poet who's run out of rhymes. You lay out your beans in tidy rows, harar, jimma, kafa, and wait. It doesn't take long. First comes an old woman named Azeb who buys your weakest roast, insists it's just right for my nerves, and pays in fresh butter. Then a young priest who claims your coffee helps him write better sermons. You're practically a saint, he mutters, counting coins from a cloth pouch. The crowd grows. Some want full beans, others want them ground, on the spot, so out comes your hand mill. And you begin the slow, meditative turn of the crank. Grind, sift, repeat. It's a rhythm older than politics, older than borders, possibly older than that fig tree overhead, which might actually be judging your technique. Mid-morning passes in a blur of sales, small talk, and the occasional barter trade involving questionable eggs. Someone offers you a live chicken in exchange for 2 scoops of beans. You decline, politely. You've learned the hard way that chickens don't pack well. By noon, the sun is relentless. You take a break, sitting under the fig tree with a cup of your own brew. Steam curls upward in lazy spirals. A breeze rustles the leaves. You feel the weight of the morning slip from your shoulders. Bit by bit, a merchant from the north joins you. laying out rough salt blocks beside your coffee mat. You know, he says between sips. Historians still argue whether salt or coffee changed this land more. You shrug. I say they go together. One preserves the food, the other preserves the soul. He grins. Poetic. You should charge extra for that. There's a pause, the kind only shared between merchants who know that rest is sacred and talk is optional. In the afternoon, you sell to a group of travelers headed to Lake Tana. They speak of monks and manuscripts, of ancient churches hidden in the cliffs. One woman insists there's a monastery where the monks drink nothing but coffee and read by the light of fireflies. You make a mental note to visit, though you suspect the firefly part may be more metaphor than fact. As the market winds down, your pouch is heavier with coin, and your shoulders lighter with empty sacks. The fig tree drops one final leaf onto your mat, as if to say, good work, time to go. You pack up, give a respectful nod to the tree, never hurts, and start the walk home. The path glows gold under the late sun. You feel tired, but it's the good kind, the kind that says, today, your hands did honest work. Back in the village, a group of teenagers is trying to invent a new dance. It involves a lot of arm flapping and pretending to be coffee trees in a storm. You applaud. They take it as encouragement, which you immediately regret. Sanite meets you outside your hut, holding a steaming bowl of lentil stew. I saw you bartering with that salt man. Please tell me you didn't trade for goats again. You hold up your hands. Only butter. And I said no to the chicken. Progress. She deadpans. You eat together under the stars. The bowl warm in your hands. Your legs pleasantly sore. She tells you village gossip. You pretend not to care, but ask follow-up questions anyway. Later, when the fire dies low, and the moon hangs like a quiet promise overhead, you lie on your mat, half listening to the night. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena laughs, or maybe it's just the wind. Sleep hovers nearby, like the steam from your morning brew. Not rushed, not forced, just gently rising dawn again. But this time, the rooster is late. You wake not to his overzealous crowing, but to the soft, rhythmic beat of pestles pounding grain in neighboring huts, a meditative thump that echoes like a heartbeat across the village. A gentler way to be summoned into the day. Really, you make a note to thank the rooster for sleeping in, if roosters can take feedback. Today is a different kind of day, not for sales, but for stories, for relationships, for the long, meandering art of maintaining your merchant network. You slip into your well-worn tunic, the one with a lucky coffee stain shaped vaguely like the Horn of Africa. Slinging your pouch and a few samples over your shoulder, you set out toward the home of an elder merchant, Beckel the Elder. Semi-retired, semi-deaf, and fully convinced that modern roasting techniques are ruining civilization. His compound is across the ridge, through a narrow stretch of tall grass that scratches your legs and occasionally coughs up a surprise snake or two. Today, just butterflies, a good omen. When you arrive, Beckel is sitting on a stool under his massive sycamore, surrounded by 3 goats and 1 human grandchild. All of them look unimpressed. Well, look who remembered the old, he shouts as you approach, voice gravelly and pleased. Come to admit Harar beans are overrated? You laugh, taking a seat beside him. Not yet, but I brought some anyway. You offer him a sample in a folded cloth. He inspects the beans like a jeweler, sniffs, rolls one between his fingers, even tastes one raw. He winces, then smiles. Terrible. I'll take half a sack. You spend the next hour listening as he recounts tales of the old caravan routes. How traders once tied charms made of hyena fur to their donkeys to ward off thieves. Historians still argue whether that worked. He adds, with a wink, but the hyenas certainly weren't consulted. He teaches you an old roasting song, slow and oddly calming, meant to keep rhythm as you stir beans over flame. You hum it under your breath as he speaks. The grandchild joins in, then insists on demonstrating their new slingshot. A rock narrowly misses the goat, who glares at you like it's your fault. Next stop, a short walk to the monastery wall. The monks here don't sell, but they do trade, and what they have is wisdom. And honey. And sometimes honeyed wisdom. You knock at the carved wooden door and wait. It creaks open with appropriate mystery. Brother Tesfaye greets you, robes loose and smile looser. Ah, the coffee alchemist returns. Tell me, did that butter bartering finally bankrupt you? You smile, only emotionally. He leads you inside, The courtyard smells of incense and crushed jasmine, a scent that clings to your clothes. You sit cross-legged as he brews coffee in the traditional clay jabena, letting the first thick drips of darkness hiss into the pot. The ritual is slow, sacred. Every motion matters. Pour, swirl, pour again. You sip together, watching bees flirt with the garden's marigolds. He speaks of old legends, how angels once carried green coffee beans from Kaffa to heaven to keep God awake during long meetings. You raise an eyebrow. Do we know if he preferred medium roast? Medium dark. Tesfaye answers, deadpan, with a cinnamon stick. You stay for a while, trading beans for a tiny jar of honey and a blessing for safe travels. The blessing might weigh more. In the afternoon, you take the longer route home, through a series of back trails that loop past farms and shaded brooks. Here, you're just a figure on the landscape, a merchant off duty, whistling an old roasting tune, greeted by nods and the occasional lazy goat. At one farm, a woman waves you over. She's harvesting teff, the ancient grain used for injera, and needs help lifting a particularly stubborn sack. You oblige, and in exchange, she offers you a handful of dried figs. As you chew, she tells you how her grandfather used to infuse coffee with fig juice for guests of honor. They said it gave dreams. She adds, you don't doubt it. Everything gives dreams out here. Figs, coffee, moonlight. The way clouds cling to the distant hills like wool on a thorn bush. As you descend into the village, the sky begins to smudge with twilight. Birds sweep low. A soft wind rises from the valley, carrying scents of wood smoke and roasting grain. You pass by a group of weavers finishing a tapestry under the last light. One of them looks up and asks, did you bring stories, coffee man? You grin, only the true ones, and some less true, but better told. They make space on the mat, and you sit down, the village folding gently around you as the stars peek out like scattered seeds across the velvet sky. You begin a story, one Beckel swears happened, though physics strongly disagrees, about a donkey that outran a lion thanks to 3 cups of espresso and a very fast hill. The weavers laugh. Someone hands you a cup of lentil soup. The night stretches, soft and elastic, like it never quite wants to end. By the time you rise, full of food and laughter, the world has gone quiet. Lanterns flicker in distant doorways. The moon is a generous slice above the horizon, and your steps are lighter than they have any right to be after such a long day. You return home, place your honey jar on the shelf, and collapse onto your mat. Sleep comes immediately. No struggle, no ceremony, just the sure, sinking warmth of a body that moved, traded, and remembered joy. And outside, in the quiet dark, the rooster finally decides to crow. Late, completely off schedule. You smile in your sleep. You rise before the sun. Not out of duty this time, but from habit, your internal merchant clock ticking even on a rest day. The air is cooler now, touched by the breath of the highlands. A low fog hangs like a curtain, and you move through it like a wandering spirit, careful not to disturb the peace. This morning, you're headed to the village grindhouse. Not for business, but for social logistics. You bring a small sack of dried coffee cherries, some still with the outer pulp intact, to be ground down into a coarser blend known locally as kuti. It's not your usual style, but the older generation loves it, and hosting them later today without it would be a social faux pas of criminal proportions. The grindhouse is a round mud structure with a thatched roof and laughter spilling out of it like smoke. Inside, the rhythm of stone on stone mixes with gossip, small talk, and the low buzz of opinionated grandmothers. You're quickly pulled into a debate over whether kuti was originally consumed by warriors or monks. Historians still argue whether it began in battle camps or prayer halls. Someone says, then promptly accuses another of always siding with the monks. Because your cousin married one, you pretend to have an opinion, nod seriously, and pass your cherries to the grinding matron, who sniffs them with theatrical suspicion before breaking into a grin. Still using that lucky bean pouch? One day it'll fall apart and take your luck with it. You tell her it's already held together by sheer willpower and caffeine. Once the grinding is done, you collect your kuti, now looking like crushed gemstones with a sharp, earthy aroma. You breathe it in deeply, letting it take over your senses. Somewhere in that dusty fragrance, you swear you can smell stories. As the sun edges higher, You return home to begin preparations. Today, you're hosting a traditional coffee ceremony, a practice that's equal parts hospitality, ritual, and low-key neighborhood theater. You sweep the yard, lay down woven mats, arrange small stools in a crescent, and build a fire pit using stones you personally hauled from a riverbed months ago. You're still proud of that, even if no one else remembers. You measure the green beans carefully, selecting only those without chips or odd coloring. The bad ones, you toss over your shoulder, whispering tiny curses at them for wasting your time. This is mostly for fun, but you do notice your cat never steps where those beans land. Superstition? Maybe, but superstition and coffee have always brewed well together. Once the fire is lit, you bring out your jabena, a smooth black clay coffee pot you've had for years. It's slightly lopsided now, but you like it better that way. Like a friend who limps a bit but still dances. Guests begin arriving slowly. First, the older women with their patterned shawls and heavy earrings. Then a few cousins. A wandering poet shows up uninvited but welcomed nonetheless. That's how it goes. You pour water into the jabena, add the freshly roasted beans, and place it gently over the flame. Careful not to rush. The first bubbles rise like secrets, and the scent wafts out like a signal. More neighbors drift in. There are 3 pours in a traditional ceremony: a ball, tona, and baraka. The first is bold and strong, a statement. The second, smoother, for comfort. The third, soft and faint, a symbol of peace. Some say the first pour is for the body, the second for the heart, and the third for the soul. Historians still argue whether this order reflects ancient medicine or just good hospitality. Someone quips, as the coffee steams, you pass around incense, frankincense, smoldering with a syrupy scent, and trays of roasted barley, popped grains, and those figs from yesterday. A few kids dart in and out of the gathering, chased by a particularly dramatic chicken who believes she owns your courtyard. Then comes the part you secretly love, storytelling. It begins innocently, with a retelling of the week's small dramas, a neighbor's ox getting stuck in the river, someone's aunt claiming she saw a lion in a banana grove. It was a goat. It's always a goat. But soon, the stories deepen. Someone recalls a storm that swallowed 3 tents back in '89. Another speaks of a wedding procession so long it took 2 days to walk past the market. You sip slowly from your ceramic cup, letting the coffee cool and sweeten slightly. Your mind drifts to your grandfather, who once told you that each cup shared was a promise, of trade, of peace, of memory. As the ceremony winds down, you're left with a crescent of glowing embers and half-finished cups resting on the ground like sleepy sentinels. The poet, who somehow never stopped talking, leans close and whispers, "You know, the best coffee I ever had was made from beans a goat spat out." You blink. He nods. Solemn. "Changed my life." You offer him a second cup, just in case he's still living the effects. By late afternoon, the guests trickle out, full of caffeine and stories and barley. You collect the cups, wipe down the mats, and douse the fire, now reduced to flickering ghosts. As you scrub the jabena, you hum the roasting song Beckel taught you, your voice half lost in the hush that follows celebration. The courtyard is quiet again. You sit under the acacia tree with your final cup, third pour, of course. The flavor is faint now, almost an echo, but it wraps around your tongue like silk. You sip and stare at the sky. Clouds drifting like old trade caravans across a blue desert. It's been a good day. A nourishing one. You close your eyes and breathe in deeply. Coffee, smoke, stories, friendship, it's all still there, clinging gently to the fibers of your clothes. Your breath, your memory, and the chicken, still indignant, pecks once at your sandal, then struts off like she won the argument the next morning. You awaken not to the scent of brewing coffee, but to the distant sound of drums. Soft at first, barely audible beneath the chirps of morning birds and rustling trees, but growing steadily louder. Like a heartbeat amplified by the hills. You stretch, blink at the dusty sunlight filtering through your window, and listen closely. Not festival drums, those are faster. Erratic, wild, these are ceremonial, deliberate. Something formal is happening. Curiosity overpowers grogginess. You throw on your robe, slip into sandals, and head toward the village center where a small crowd is beginning to gather. Today marks the start of a makina ritual, a weaving blessing. You'd forgotten, of course. You always forget until the drums start. A large loom has been set up beneath a shade canopy. Its threads already strung like the frame of a harp. Elder weavers in bright shawls move around it with quiet reverence, placing offerings at each corner: dried corn, tiny bundles of hyacinth, and a carved wooden shuttle passed down for generations. You recognize the eldest weaver, Ale, a legend in his own way, known not just for his tapestries but for claiming he once made a blanket so warm it melted hail. Historians still argue whether that was poetic exaggeration or flawed meteorology. You joke to the man beside you. He snorts. The ceremony begins with chanting. Low, repetitive, not quite melodic, but oddly calming. You ease down onto a wooden stool, crossing your legs and letting your body sink into the rhythm. The loom, the chanting, the incense wafting over the threads, it's all a sort of sleepy hypnosis. Then, as is tradition, someone starts the Sheggar tale, the origin myth of weaving. Long ago, they begin. A woman saw a spider dancing across dew-soaked vines. The story weaves itself like the cloth it honors, slow, winding, with asides and side quests and the occasional joke about donkeys. Everyone knows the ending, but we all pretend we don't. That's the ritual. By midday, the ceremonial first cloth has been started. Only 2 inches of woven color so far, but each strand is blessed. Each pass of the shuttle a prayer. You notice the color pattern is unfamiliar: warm ochre, green, and a streak of black like a shadow. You ask Ale about it. He smiles. New pattern. Represents the dry season ending. Later, you find yourself in the corner of the courtyard, sipping spicy tea and chatting with the loom apprentices. They're joking about how fast they could escape if one of the threads snapped and a spirit got loose. We'd run faster than the coffee prices drop during drought season, one says. You laugh, not because it's a good joke, but because the way she says it sounds exactly like your uncle when he's haggling. Someone passes you a piece of freshly baked flatbread, still hot, wrapped in banana leaves. You tear it, steam curling into your face, and eat slowly, chewing to the rhythm of the loom's knock. There's something deeply comforting about watching people create something with such care and patience. And speaking of care and patience, you remember your tab at the dye merchant stall. It's still unpaid. You make a mental note to clear it this week. The merchant is kind, but his memory is as sharp as his indigo. In the afternoon, the rhythm of the day shifts again. The weavers pause for rest. A low hum settles over the space like a blanket. No words now. Just quiet domesticity. People take turns pouring water from a clay jug into each other's palms. A group of boys plays Mancala in the dust. A baby falls asleep on its grandmother's back, fingers still clutching a bread crumb. You wander back toward your stall, past bundles of grass brooms and dyed wool drying in the sun. A small girl, no older than 7, tugs at your sleeve. She holds up a scrap of cloth, miswoven and uneven, but clearly done with intense focus. My first one, she says, proud but shy. You kneel and examine it as though it were royal silk. You know, you say, this would make a perfect pocket lining for a merchant who always loses his money. Her smile could light a kiln. As the sun dips lower, you sit again by the loom and watch the day's cloth grow another few inches. The pattern is more distinct now, like rain falling over farmland. The weavers murmur softly, debating thread tension and dye mixes. You catch one saying, no 2 weavers agree on how tight is too tight, and someone else replies, like marriage. Then, the crowd chuckles, and you sip the last of your tea. Evening settles like a second skin. The drums return, softer this time, like lullabies. The ceremony is not finished, but it pauses here. Weaving takes days, sometimes weeks, but no one's in a hurry. Not in this corner of the world. Not when each pass of the shuttle is a kind of meditation. You head home with a bit of scrap thread in your pocket, given to you by Ale himself. For luck, he said, or to tie up your ego if it gets too loud. You lie down on your woven mat that night, the scent of smoke and hyacinth still clinging to your sleeves. As you drift, your fingers absent-mindedly roll that scrap of thread between them. And in the darkness, you swear you can still hear the soft knock of the loom, patient, eternal. Waiting for morning. Your sleep is deep, almost ceremonial. You wake slowly, surrounded by silence, your limbs reluctant to obey the morning light seeping through the wooden shutters. It's one of those rare days when business doesn't tug at your collar before sunrise. No deliveries to make, no gossip to chase, no coins burning holes in your customers' pockets. A coffee light day, as the locals call it, when the village breathes just a bit slower. Like a merchant's sigh after haggling down a stubborn trader. Still, habits are hard to shake. You swing your legs over the edge of the mat and stretch, wincing a little as your back reminds you of yesterday's extended sitting. You're no weaver, but somehow loom watching seems just as hard on the spine. Your first stop is the little charcoal brazier, where the remains of yesterday's coals whisper heat. You coax them back to life with dried twigs and a patient breath, placing your battered coffee pot over the flame. Soon, the familiar scent curls up to greet you, earthy, nutty, tinged with the faintest hint of cardamom from the reused pot. If perfume had a conscience, it would smell like this. As the coffee simmers, you think of a small task that's been nudging your conscience all week. Restocking the cinnamon. Not the flashy sticks from India, but the local variety, rougher, darker, with a bite like a stern ant. The spice merchant, an older woman named Merit, keeps her stall under a shady awning and runs it with the efficiency of a tax collector. By mid-morning, you find yourself at her stall. She's counting lentils, as always, and only raises an eyebrow when you ask about cinnamon. Last batch sold to a priest, she says without looking up. Said he needed it for sacred stew. Whatever that means. Sounds delicious. You reply. Sounds suspicious. She mutters, and hands you a wrapped bundle. You pay with a mix of coins and a favor owed, standard merchant currency. From there, your feet take you past the music maker's corner. An old man plays a crowar, 6 strings of melancholic beauty, and beside him, a boy taps a goat skin drum, trying to keep pace. You pause to listen. It's not particularly good, but it is earnest, and that's worth something. Historians still argue whether the crowar originated here or migrated from further north. The old man says without stopping his playing, but everyone agrees I'm the best player in this village. He winks. By midday, the sun has laid claim to the sky, and your thoughts drift toward shade. You duck into the back of your stall, where the walls are lined with jute sacks and string-bound ledgers, and the temperature drops by a blessed few degrees. You pull out your inventory scroll, an unruly document full of crossings out and doodles, and begin to update it. 10 sacks of beans, 6 jars of honey, and 3 missing spoons? You frown. The spoons again. You're convinced there's a spoon thief in the village. Not for profit, mind you, just for sport. As you reorganize the stock, a child pokes her head through the curtain. The storyteller's back, she says. That gets your attention. You abandon the scroll and follow the trickle of villagers to the banyan tree at the edge of the market. There, perched on a stump and wrapped in a shawl that looks like it's seen 5 dynasties, sits the traveling storyteller. No one knows where he comes from. He shows up once or twice a year. Never says when. Always just appears. Today, he's in full form. His tale is about a river that flowed backward, a farmer who grew laughter instead of crops, and a camel who became king for exactly one afternoon. None of it makes sense, and no one questions a word. It's not meant to be believed. It's meant to be shared. As he speaks, you notice an odd detail. He's wearing shoes stitched in the pattern of the southern provinces, something rarely seen here. A reminder that the country is large, and your little village is just a comfortable thread in a very elaborate fabric. He finishes with a bow and a flourish, and as the crowd disperses, you catch a snatch of conversation between 2 young women. Didn't he tell that same story last year? Yes, but he added a goat this time. Story evolution in real time. The afternoon drifts on. You find yourself by the riverbank. Shoes off, feet dangling in cool water. A pair of goats bleat somewhere upstream. Across the water, a woman washes her laundry on the rocks, singing under her breath. The tune is unfamiliar, probably from another region, but something in the cadence feels ancestral, as if it's always been there, just waiting for someone to hum it again. You close your eyes for a while, not to sleep, just to listen, to the birds, the breeze, the occasional plop of a frog, to the sound of a village existing without effort. And you think to yourself, this is wealth, not coin, not inventory, not even coffee, though that one's a close second. Just this. Time to sit, time to hear, time to be. When you rise to go, you spot something washed ashore. A carved wooden bead. Probably part of a necklace. You pick it up, roll it between your fingers, and smile. You'll add it to the growing collection in your stall, the shelf of oddments that never sell, but always spark conversation. A spoon bent in the shape of a crescent moon. A chipped teacup with a poem etched inside. And now, a bead that drifted in from who knows where. Back at your home, you place the bead gently on the shelf. It doesn't match anything else, which means it fits perfectly. The sun is beginning to lower itself. Lazily, like a merchant at the end of a long market day, bargaining for just 5 more minutes of daylight before closing the shutters. You tilt your head back and watch the sky ease from blue to apricot, softening like warm butter across injera. This, right here, is the part of the day that seems to sigh out loud. You return home, and without much thought, start preparing a simple dinner. Lentils and stewed greens tonight, with a few leftover flatbreads warmed gently over embers. The rhythm of chopping, stirring, and tasting is familiar, soothing. You don't rush, because no one rushes a meal meant only for themselves. As the stew simmers, you sit just outside your door, knees drawn up, bowl in your hands. Across the way, the neighbors' children are pretending to be warriors and cattle herders, shouting dramatic nonsense and swinging sticks like swords. Their older sister, unimpressed, chants made-up court cases and pretends to judge them from a rock she insists is a royal bench. You laugh into your food. The stew is good, slightly too salty, but the kind of salty that makes you feel clever for having cooked it. You think, idly, about the idea of time. Not the modern kind that chases itself around a clock, but the older kind, the one that lives in footsteps, in harvests, in how long it takes a bean to roast or a story to grow roots. A few neighbors pass, offer waves, a friendly joke, the occasional question about prices or new beans coming in next week. You answer easily, without standing up. This part of the day requires only your presence, not your ledger. As twilight deepens, someone lights a lantern, then another. The village begins to glow in patches of amber and flickering shadows. Smoke curls up in loose spirals from a dozen homes. Laughter bubbles from behind a curtain. A baby somewhere hiccups, pauses, then resumes crying with committed indignation. You tidy up, stacking your cooking bowls with a practiced hand, and then settle into the sleeping mat once more, belly full and spine happy. You reach for the small carved bead from earlier and roll it between your fingers. Still smooth, still strange, still yours now. You remember your first days as a merchant. How lost you felt among the spice stacks, the ink-splattered ledgers, the foreign coins. How unsure you were of when to nod, when to haggle, when to just walk away. But now, you're a fixture, a voice people ask for, a face others seek out when the coffee tastes off or a goat has wandered off with someone's laundry again. Historians still argue whether merchant life in 19th century Ethiopia was mostly solitary or social, but you know the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You spend your days surrounded by people, and yet there are quiet rituals only you know. Your coffee, your shelves, your folded notes, your end-of-day stew. You think of tomorrow, another market, another set of deliveries, maybe a barter with the tanner for a new belt. Perhaps even time to jot down that poem that's been flitting around your mind like a moth near lamplight. It starts with 3 goats and 1 very stubborn moon, but refuses to settle beyond that. Your eyes grow heavier. The night outside whispers low lullabies in the wind, leaves brushing each other like old friends sharing gossip. The world doesn't demand anything from you right now. No trade, no tallying, no tea to brew. You breathe in the scent of earth, of wood smoke, of old linen and warm air. You breathe out, and let yourself drift. And now, the sky outside your little stall has melted into a blanket of charcoal blue, pinpricked with sleepy stars that blink like they, too, have stories to forget before dawn. The village is quiet now. Only the soft hush of wind against the shutters, and the distant echo of a nightbird calling for a mate who may or may not be listening. Inside, the last ember in your stove glows faintly, like a firefly deciding whether to sleep in or fly on. Your limbs are heavy in the nicest way, like someone has gently told them they can rest. And they believed it without hesitation. The bead is still in your hand, though your grip is looser now. You let it fall gently to the mat beside you. It makes the tiniest sound as it lands, a soft reminder that even small things can hold weight. Let your breath deepen, Let the thoughts slow their pacing. Let the day roll over into tomorrow like a lazy wheel. Content to wait. Maybe in the morning there will be another shipment. Maybe a visit from the tax clerk. Maybe the storyteller will still be there, offering tales in exchange for fresh bread or polite applause. Or maybe not. It doesn't matter. Because for now, nothing is required of you. Only this moment. Only this quiet. Only this dream that's already halfway here.